Welcome back to Speak with Anuj. Thank you for tuning in. In my attempt to decode the universe of communication, today I want to talk about the role of music and rhythm in the way we communicate. How intentioned exposure to music greatly enhances the way we modulate our voice or use volume, pitch, tone, rate of speech in the way we communicate our sentences, or even use pauses and beats as we express ourselves. And who better to understand and explain this than my dear friend and accomplished musician, Viveick Rajagopalan, a multi-instrumentalist, percussionist, and master of the ancient South Indian vocal percussion art form, Konnakol. Viveick seamlessly blends multiple genres of music together, also brings together ancient musical wisdom and contemporary understanding of human connection. He's collaborated with some of the biggest names in the world of music, and today on this podcast, I'm going to learn from him how music enhances our communication skills and the way we speak. What is the role of non-verbal communication and music in the way we express ourselves, and how music education greatly enhances our cognitive ability. For all these answers and a lot more, let's dive into the rhythm of communication. Thank you, Viveick, for joining Speak with Anuj, for speaking with Anuj. Very, very glad that we were finally able to make it for this conversation, rather. I've been doing this podcast about learning communication styles of people from all walks of life. People who
Right,
are in the business of communicating with other people. Now, it could
right.
be a small gathering, could be one to one, could be an audience. So, of course, in the business of communication, there are artists, but when you think of communication, you think of often the spoken word. But we
Mm-hmm.
don't often realize that far beyond the spoken word is non-verbal communication that sends out a much larger message often to people, to audiences, to anyone who you're interacting with. And you are in the business of communication with of communicating with rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I want to explore. You've been around the world, you've been creating some incredible music, and you've been communicating with audiences through various instruments and innovations that I'm very excited to unpack. But I wanted to learn from you what your communication style is, and hopefully someone who's listening to this will be able to take away some things that will improve their communication skills. That's the idea. So let's get started. What's going on right now with you? What's happening in your world of communication right now?
I mean, Tadum project obviously has been one of my pet projects, which I started about 9 years back, almost now. And it's actually, taught me a lot, reassured some of the things that I believed in. Excited about it actually more than anything else because I think it's something which people hopefully will keep discovering and rediscovering, So about this language of rhythm, that's what is so potent in our country, especially. Currently, I mean, Tadom has been keeping me busy in that sense, both teaching and performing.
But was Tadhom something that at an early age in school you said, I just want to play instruments and this is what I want to do? Did it come from that childhood feeling aspiration, or was there something else that you had in mind?
Uh, Not really. See, we were taught this art form as a medium to sort of play the instrument called the mridangam, which is what I started learning. And it's a medium, right? So unlike the West, where you have notations and you read music, so you engage almost in three senses. Here we just engage in two, which is speaking and listening, right? And that's how we learn. So there's no engagement of a third sense of uh, reading. There's no concept of reading in Indian music, traditional music as such. So, as a medium of learning, my guru T.S. Nandakumar, he used to insist that we have to say it right before we play. So that got inculcated very early. I didn't. When you're learning, you don't make a big deal about these things, but it's only when you start listening to others and you start observing, is you see sometimes that how the pronunciations of the bowls or Konnakol or the mridangam rhythms or tabla rhythms or whatever it is, the a lot of people actually lack clarity in the way they would say it. So these are all like, let's say, observations happening subliminally because Honestly, I was not doing busy. I was not busy doing any of this. I was playing the mridangam. It was like it had just become my passion in a way. I kept playing it, but at the same time, I'd gone into composing, producing, and I was doing other stuff. So it was, like I said, it was sometime around 9 years back is when I sort of met a rapper, and again, it's one of the several lowest phases in my life that I was in, and trying to discover how should I approach my music and all those things is when I met this guy and I said, let me share. What is it that I can share? Is there anything worth it that I have with me so far that I can share? And this thing of Konnakol just occurred to me because it's your voice. You don't need to buy instruments. You don't need to learn it only because you learn mridangam. That is one thing that I felt very intuitively, that it's not like you have to learn to play the mridangam to learn Konnakol. So I separated the two in my head, and it actually became a medium of learning, discovering, teaching. Like if I have to give it to you in another completely parallel way, very early on, we learn the shloka, and it is said when we are children itself, we are taught this, which is Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishami Siddhar Bhavatme Sada. And it is said with the thing that whatever I say, please, Mother Saraswati, sit on my tongue and make me say the good things. So you're being very conscious about what you want to say as well. So communication went beyond just speaking. It started saying whatever words I want to utter, please make sure that I utter the right words, right? So then that's one part of it, which parallelly, very subconsciously was embedded, and you're not aware of it till slowly when you realize the value of how we react to certain things without thinking. There's so much less value to how you say those things, and whether you're going to hurt anybody, not hurt anybody. Now the best part about Konnakol is I can say the wildest of things and you will not get hurt. Now that is what I started playing with. Like for instance, if I say uh, right, if I say it this way, you don't know if I'm saying it with anger or with love, but it has fire in it, the way I say it. But if I say tang, takitadimi, takitadimi, tang, takitadimi, there's dance, there's beauty, there's it could be love dance, it could be anything, so or it could be me actually saying something very rude to you as well, but you don't understand, right? So I think musical language actually takes you back to the fact that it's all about feeling, right? It's about intention, it's about feeling. So I think that all these things sort of got unraveled in the process because all the people whom I taught did not have a Carnatic music background, right? That's another very stereotypical thing that I was able to break as an experiment. Some of them even didn't know what Carnatic music was. Again, linguistically, right? Normally it is people from the south who would learn this naturally because you're learning the mridangam. It's not that only South Indians learned it. Like I know even people like legends like Zakir Hussain or a lot of the tabla players have actually learnt the mridangam bowls as well. But Konnakol as an art form has existed for more than 5,000 years. That's a fact which not many people know. So the fact that a language of rhythm so evolved has lasted thus far is also worthy of thinking that besides race change, besides so many historical things, parallelly, one art form has survived, and even in 2015 or 2024, it has found its way into being. And I don't want to get into some statistical numbers of it, but the fact is that there are people in Europe, in Spain, and Portugal, and Japan, and so many different countries who are actually learning this art form. You know, so it's fascinating that way that today when we stand, we're constantly there's so much division amongst the race as as human beings, and there's so much polarization about everything, and this hatred being belted. Honestly, this has become a way for me to, even if it's in a smallest of way, like I don't have big numbers for, I don't chase that at all, but I think in my smallest of way, it is bringing people together. And if it is in a 1 hour concert in Spain where nobody understands Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Konnakol, but they're all vibing to it, it's beautiful because 99% of the people there were Spanish today when I go to a UP and I in Faizabad, I do a concert where I'm doing Tamil, I'm doing, of course, Bhojpuri, and I'm doing Marathi. People are, and there's Konnakol. So that Konnakol has become the binding factor, reminding people that, oh yes, there is Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, but hey, there's one thing which can unite all of this, which is the language of rhythm, you know. And I think it always brings a smile on anybody's face in the last few years that I performed, that it's unfathomable, but they just love it, you know. So love being the factor and of creating this is what drives me to actually spread this art form as much as I can, you know.
Beautiful. Wow. You've unraveled so much. There is the history of music, history of the art form itself. There is empathy in communication. There is storytelling through the ages. Yeah, Vivek, I loved what you just said. And genuinely, मतलब इतना passionate about a rather very seemingly invisible art form that has been, like you said, 5,000 years. It's just
Yeah,
been there, but it's
yeah,
been propagating the stories of our culture. And like you said, with India, there is no written music. There is, it's expressed and it's heard. And the stories that have propagated through the various art forms have propagated culture, have propagated, the stories of people, of societies, of civilization itself. How did you find your storytelling through this? How did that evolve from the start to where it is?
yeah. So it's actually been a very unsettling journey for a very long time, and it takes time to be honest, because as you grow, you are learning, you know, and then you watch different things, and there's a lot of information from different people. Then there are people who give you solicited advice, unsolicited advice, all those kind of things that keep happening. And in the middle of all that clutter, you have to find what's driving you. You know, I think today I'm able to say this in as much clarity of thought that for me, music as a practitioner, as a student of music, has become the chase has become about bringing people together for that 1 hour, for that 1.5 hours. And if I can bring people together without making it cheap, without making it intellectual, both spectrums, coming to the core of it, which is, can people just forget what they do otherwise in their lives? Is there a message of love and peace and things beyond just saying my heart broke, I fell in love, and then again I had another heartbreak, or about anything else that's very materialistic? There's very interesting musician whom I met, and very senior guy, and most interesting musicians teach through their philosophy. It's not so much about which rag to sing and which tal to sing. And that's what I've always chased, you know. What's the philosophy of this guy? So one musician very candidly said this, and he said, I mean, he speaks Tamil, so he was trying to put some words in English and try to explain it to me. He just said, there's too much sex in these times. So I was like flabbergasted. I said, what does he mean? So he said, the thing is, in the human body, right? There is energy above the waist, which is the heart, and then there is energy below the waist. So what do you want to cater to? You want to cater to the heart, or you just want people to just keep? So he was talking in a very different way. It was about, even if it is dance, can it be heart, right? Even if it is painting, can it be heart? Can you move people in from the heart perspective and not just be direct about it? Like, don't be so direct that yeah, नाच तो रहे हैं, but नाच रहे हैं, पर क्या क्या कैसे नाच रहे हैं? मतलब वो भी तो देखो, you know, are they kids? Can I involve children? Can I involve 70-year-olds? My biggest, joy has been when a 73-year-old uncle actually waited till we packed, the entire concert got over, and he came and spoke to us saying, I did not imagine rap music could be like this, and I did not imagine that I could feel like this, and there are children who will come and talk, right? So these things make a big difference to me in terms of how it's like, जैसे हम लोग ताल में ना लय के बारे में बात करते हैं, तो it's there is a we say time cycle, कि मतलब जहां से शुरू हुआ, अब जब ये खत्म करते हो उसको
Hmm.
सम बोलते हैं, ठीक है,
Hmm.
खत्म हुआ, वहां पे सम पे खत्म हुआ, लेकिन जब नया साइकिल शुरू होता है फिर वो उसको इसीलिए उसको टाइम साइकिल बोलते हैं, राइट? तो ये जो टाइम साइकिल को मैंने जिस तरह इंटरप्रेट किया है कि तुम्हारा जो ताल का शुरुआत है वो अगर यहाँ से है तो वो वहीं पहुंचेगा, अगर यहाँ से है तो वो वहीं पहुंचेगा। तो आपने जहां से शुरू किया है वहीं से वो उसका टाइम साइकिल वहीं जाके एंड होगा। इसीलिए व्हेन यू लिसन टू सम लेजेंड्स दे माइट बी सिंगिंग आज जाने की जिद ना करो, राइट, बट समथिंग इज सो क्यूट और hits you
Yeah.
versus somebody else
Yeah.
singing that one cannot learn. That's a philosophy you have to live, and then that
Mm.
exuberates, right? So same way Konnakol में मैं इतने सारे कॉम्प्लेक्स रिदम्स करता हूँ, इतने सारे, मतलब म्यूजिशियंस को सरप्राइज होता है कि ये कैसे हो रहा है करके, बट एट द सेम टाइम पीपल आर डांसिंग टू इट. सो दैट लाइन, ट्राइंग टू अचीव समथिंग डीपर, लाइक नॉट superficial but go deeper, but yet make people feel that depth, not intimidate, right? This a very, it's a very different thing. I think that has been my biggest. Still, I still like dig for it. I still keep digging कि इसको और डेप्थ में कैसे ले जाए और कनेक्ट कैसे करें. So connecting people. There's a word in Carnatic music which is actually there in Hindi and Urdu also. It's called kacheri. Okay,
Yes.
it's very commonly used, right? They'll say like in Tamil they'll say இன்னைக்கு kacheri இருக்குப்பா, which is actually a concert. But in Hindi we say quote kacheri, right? There's a very different usage of the word kacheri, which actually means a gathering.
Or what you call a mehfil.
Yeah, so you can call a mehfil or a gathering of people together, right? We actually did not have the idea of concert where you perform for someone. The big difference between performing with people versus saying performing for people. So when you say performing with people, my energy of the audience, it's the people on the stage and the people, that's a kacheri. So that means I'm with you. So बहुत फर्क पड़ता है when you say small things in a different way, that I want to perform with you. So that means I need your energy. I need you to be here. And if you're not here, no problem, but that's required. I cannot be some higher level spiritual or popular guy who's performing for you, right? I think these are all intentions that you need to align when you think about all these things. That's why I said, for me, the driving force is just bringing people together. That's as simple as that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, I'm so glad you said this because, and I relate to it so deeply because communication. I tell this to my students when I teach them is that communication is, don't look at it as a performance, look at it as a conversation you're having with the audience, because normally they come up on stage and then they have some lines with them, they want to say a speech and they go, good evening ladies and gentlemen, and this is how we're going to now enjoy this evening, and we've come so far in our journey together as a company. Like, no, have a conversation with them, make it relatable, bring them together rather than create a distance between you and the audience. And I so relate to what you're saying, uh, and that comes from a place of empathic intent. There is empathy. You're not trying to project yourself as a higher being or on a higher platform that you're performing and all of you are looking up to me. I also want to ask you, now this is something very interesting that you live by, is that creativity begins when the mind pauses.
Yeah.
Unpack that for me a little bit.
When we say creativity or creative journey or being creative, right? If you just think about it from the time you were a child, you just drew without any conditioning. That's how it starts. Or you just sang without any conditioning. So there was no fear, you just expressed, right? What happens is through the process of our journey, we start getting conditioned with ideas. Rightly so. Some of it is to do with skills. Some of it is to say learning English as a grammar, like getting the grammars in place so that you're able to express maybe better or say what you want to say in the most beautiful way. So we learn languages, we learn different things. So as a musician, you learn, let's say, the different time cycles, the tala, or if you're learning ragas or Western classical, whatever, you go through the drill. Parallelly, also you get a lot of, what happens is you also get conditioned a lot with how you're reacting. For instance, sometimes I do this thing where it could be a brief or it could be something that I'm working on, that when an idea comes to me instantly, I don't react to it because it's possible it's come from my conditioned mind. It's come conditioning of how I hear things or how I'm supposed to do things. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, For me, that pause of what I don't know right now, what am I going to do? So for instance, let's say it could be a collaboration that you get into. right? One way of getting into a collaboration is say, how am I going to look good in this collaboration? Okay. The other way to look at it is musical exploration of saying, I have these experiences, but let's start from zero. Now I don't know what I'm going to do. So when I don't know what I'm going to do, that creative process is what is more exciting, where it comes from a place of trying out completely something you might have never played before or never thought of before. Otherwise, for me, it's like any other corporate job or a formulaic way of thinking, saying this plus this plus this is what. Where is a discovery, right? And here again, I put a disclaimer here. I'm not saying that I might discover something which others wouldn't have discovered, but the fact that I discovered it for myself is what is more important for me. You know,
Right.
that seeking part, saying, and that doesn't come if you're not unsettled. You know, if you don't feel, क्या होने वाला? It's like taking a, let me metaphorically put it, it's like taking a journey into a wild and you don't know where you're going to go, versus completely giving you Google Maps, asking every detail. अच्छा भाई वहाँ पानी मिलेगा क्या? वहाँ पराठा मिलेगा क्या? वहाँ ढाबे हैं क्या? You know, अच्छा उस कमरे में AC टेम्परेचर ठीक है क्या? Versus saying no, let's just go, right? देखते हैं क्या होता है. I'm saying there is a madness to just taking a journey without literally knowing where you're heading. And I think to me that part of the creativity is what excites me when you actually have a moment of pause, saying, now I don't know what to do. You know,
How do you think audiences pick up on this? Often people, I mean, when an audience is watching a performance, there's a lot of improvisation happening on stage. There's a lot of exploration, like you said. It's happening on stage between the artists. How do audiences respond to this? Do they get thrown off, or do they flow? Again, is that dependent on the skill of the artist to make it look like this improvisation has been practiced?
see, improvisation comes with a lot of. So there are two aspects to this. One is the audience aspect to it. One is yourself, right? You have to finish the journey with yourself. You have to be so confident about doing something on stage that the improvisation actually comes with, I'll use the word sadhana or riyaz. Okay, it's very different from practice. Because when I say practice, if you look at the dictionary meaning of practice, it's literally mere repetition of an action. So I don't need my mind for it. Okay? When you say sadhana, it is sitting with yourself and it's an inner journey. Okay? It's not only mere repetition of an action. So when you take, let's say, one particular pattern and you just play it, one is to mindlessly play it. One is to say, अच्छा मेरा हाथ का intention, velocity क्या है, कैसे feel हो रहा है. Then you start building the trust with the instrument first, with your hands and the instrument. That trust between the instrument and your hands needs to happen. Saying, ठीक है, तू जो बोलेगा मैं, I'll produce it. It takes time. Then you start feeling every small nuance. Then there is the BPM part of it. I mean, people think this is only music. There's the science part of it, which is when I say raga, it's called the valence. Okay, the BPM, जो speed में हम perform करते हैं, that is the arousal quotient, right? So the arousal and valence quotient together is what is sur and tal together. Okay, बहुत सारे इसके निकल सकते हैं. That is what is yin and yang. That is what is Shiva and Shakti. In fact, tala, the word has actually come from ta is Tandav and la is Lasya.
Wow. Oh wow.
Okay, so that beauty needs to be understood. तो जब साधना जब भी कर रहे हो, so you are not merely playing numbers. You're not merely playing some bowl. You have to seek the beauty in that. Once you start feeling the beauty, is only then can you express it. If you don't feel it, right, is how will you express it? So once you start feeling, then it's about the audience lending that trust in you.
Right.
You know, that relationship that they have with you. Now it's up to you at that time, place, everything, mood, all that comes into play, you know. So which is why that kind of magic happens very little. It doesn't happen very often, you know, because it's an alignment thing, and that all this needs to be aligned for it to work as wah nikalna, you know. I mean, I'll give you a parallel, like I told you, philosophy, right? There's another legendary mridangam player, Manargudi Vasudevan sir. Sorry, what am I saying? Manargudi Ishwaran sir. he once told me this interesting philosophy. He said, "You're also playing the same thing. There are 10 mridangam players who play the same thing. Why is it that audience goes, ah, in that guy's playing versus this?" And I mean, whether we agree or disagree, this was his philosophy, and I found it very beautiful as an observer. He said, for that transmission, there's air, science says that there is air particles that transmits, right? From
Yes.
That's how people listen. He said, but there is another layer to it where you need your mother's blessings and your guru's blessings for it to be carried with beauty to people. Okay? Means
Okay.
he approached
Yeah.
it from a point of view of saying, without my mother's blessings, who's been so because there is another side part two to this where he said, when you're born, you take 9 months to be born, right? And your X number of hours with your mother, right? So when you're X number of hours with your mother, that's how much time it takes to build a relationship. That's how much time and number of hours you should do sadhana to build a relationship with your instrument. Minimum. This is to a question when somebody asked, how many years do I need practice to perform? Technically there is no real answer, but he put it in this way. He said, if you can practice this number of hours as a metaphor with your instrument, that means that bonding, that much is minimum needed for you to build that relationship. So he would always go back to to mother's blessings always, and he'll say, you need your mother's blessings, you need your guru's blessings for the music to translate in a certain way, And I think, like I said, it's a very different philosophy. It had nothing to do with science or lekari or whatever. Like this, there are many people who have different philosophies of how they approach beauty.
This is it's a very, very, very deep perspective, because with art you're also birthing a relationship between you and the audience. You're birthing trust, you're birthing
Exactly.
creative expression. And there is, when you look at it as something that has emerged from your relationship with your parent, there is also a sense of humility to it.
Yeah,
You are not the all important creator. You are somebody who's carrying on a legacy in some
exactly.
way, in whatever way. And art expression, communication comes also from a place of humility. It cuts across languages, like you said. You've performed for Spanish audiences, you perform for audiences across the world who don't speak Indian languages, but somewhere that resonance is created.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Because you've included a lot of diversity in your performances. There are languages, there are different styles. There's beatboxing, there's dhol, there's Konnakol, of course. There's multi-instrumental. The Tadhom project is a whole one-stop shop for percussion experience. How has this cut across audiences, this empathy, this humility, this creating that trust through rhythm?
So one thing that I've observed and also learned is that as an art form, Konnakol actually has helped in building confidence amongst a lot of the people whom I teach. There is, it actually also acts like a speech therapy in many ways. You know,
Hmm.
it acts
Hmm.
as a confidence booster in many ways for people who otherwise are very shy to communicate. So it helps them sort of open up their tongue muscles in in one side. I mean, there are two spectrums to
Wonderful.
this, right? One is when you teach students, and like I said, I have not had very conventional kind of students. So when again, in the interest of increasing the idea of community, when I started teaching dhol players, again, never it's something which is always looked at as people who play on the street, and it's only for these Maharashtra Day and big Ganpati festivals or whatever. No one's bothered bringing them on concert stage because we are so stuck with the idea of drums, which is only Western, right? They don't
Yeah.
understand that all these are drums. It's all frequencies. It's just how you conditioning, like I was telling you earlier. It's all conditioning, hyper conditioning about how fusion music or anything needs to be approached. Ultimately, it's all frequencies. So if I cover those frequencies, how does it matter whether it's a drum kit or a dhol tasha or anything else that you can put together, right? In fact, it can become an interesting ingredient of what you make.
Hmm.
So that's one side of it. But at the same time, when we do this performance for audiences across. I don't know how else to put it, but there's always some sense of awe that we meet when we meet people. They come back with, because it is breaking their conditioned mind also. They think rap is a certain kind of music.
Mm.
And when I tell them it is actually rhythm and poetry, so how does it matter that it's not a
Yeah.
typical, like the black man's hip hop or a white man's hip hop or where hip hops actually come from, right?
Yeah.
But there is rhythm and poetry everywhere, and I'm just exploring it the way I'd like to explore it, without any precedence to past, present, or future. I'm just doing it, because that's what's driving me. So that approach has definitely, every time there are people who are interested in learning, who want to know more. So without diluting it, it's definitely done this job of making people understand the value of intention, language. I know how important it is to learn it well, and all those things.
Okay, so here's the thought that I wanted to run by you. Now, of course, I come from an educational background. My parents started, two schools 40 years ago, and I helped them run it now. So I've been very involved in the whole process. And along with being in the business of communication, there is the education aspect of it. So now I've kind of married the two worlds, and now I teach communication skills. Now, one thing that's very interesting that my dad has always told me from childhood is that you don't learn mathematics for IIT or competitive exams. You learn mathematics because you want to build your quantitative ability.
Correct.
You don't learn science or biology to become a doctor. You learn science so that your awareness of the world and your observation and analytical skills about the world around you, the environment around us, heightens, right? So it's basically to build our cerebral or cognitive skills. Similarly, you don't learn music to become a singer. You learn music to imbibe rhythm into yourself, in as your being.
Yes.
Not like the whole class is going for a music class in school, right? All 35 children are not going to become singers. They're not going to become musicians. But even if a child becomes an architect, a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, the moment you have imbibed a certain rhythm into you, it dramatically changes the way you communicate with the world.
I totally, 200% concur with you. Yes, totally concur with you. And this is exactly what I say in some of the schools also. I said, do you teach math? When they ask me about, how much will they perform and all, I say the exact same thing what you said. That do you teach math, science because you think they're going to become mathematicians? No, because it's something that they need to do. The basics
Hmm.
need to be understood. Unfortunately, music is not taught like this. You know, there's always
Hmm.
some idea of, अच्छा तुम, it's like teaching cricket कि तुमको अभी तेंदुलकर बनना ही है. नहीं यार, स्पोर्ट्स है, खेलने दो. देखेंगे बनेगा
Ah.
तो बनेगा, वो उसका नसीब है. म्यूजिक को भी इसी
Hmm.
तरह एक्चुअली सिखाना चाहिए कि आप उसको फन तरीके से सीखो, which is why this rhythm and poetry thing that I've started even in schools is actually helping me, because I I realized very, through this process, that when I teach them Konnakol, which is again not many people know what it is. एक तो अच्छा सबको बाकी सब पता है, तबला पता है, every other instrument, they still don't know mridangam, they still don't know many other instruments or whatever. So, but when I teach them with poetry, like when I say taka kitta jum, ta kitta jum, kitta jum, ta jum ta, now this is a flow, right? taka kitta jum, ek do teen char panch, ek do teen char, ek do teen, ek do,
Hmm.
it's a flow, and it's a design. So our in Carnatic music system, there's a very beautiful concept of teaching or learning mridangam, or rhythm through form, and it's a very well documented idea of form. So वो फॉर्म में when I say बोलो क्या सीखा, क्या है ये बोल, कौन न कोल के बोल सुन, तारिकेटा दोम तक तारिकेटा दोम तक देखो तक देखो तारिकेटा दोम तक तारिकेटा दोम सुन, ये बोल कौन न कोल नहीं ये जोल, देखो ये सीखा. So when I teach this to kids, they are able to, it's fun, right? ये परफॉर्म करेंगे नहीं करेंगे इससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है, पर वो सीख रहे हैं कुछ इसको,
Hmm.
और वो 10 साल बाद शायद डिस्कवर करेंगे, अरे इसमें ऐसे मैथमेटिक्स है, इसमें ये है, इट्स नॉट जस्ट एनीथिंग, यू नो. So tadom was for me when you say lado musibato ko matto satsare, was tadom takka takki tatatto. It's all come through class. सारा कुछ क्लास के थ्रू ही आया
Hmm.
है ये सब. So I've started documenting it, and it's become a part of my workshop or education. I carry a small handbook where I give it to people to learn and observe. So it's definitely a beautiful way to teach people, which is rhythm and poetry, and sort of introducing rhythm in the most fun way, to them.
Hmm. In fact, when I speak with people, or when on in an everyday life, or I'm hosting an event and I see the CEO come on or a senior leader come on and address the audience, I can tell whether this person has had some rhythm training in school or not, just by the way they modulate their voice and flow through
Yeah.
the speech when they're addressing the audience, the highs and lows, how they
Tempo.
pause for a breath,
Yeah,
how
even the
much
tempo they
staccato
speak
they
in.
have during
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
right. uh, One very interesting observation that I've made is when I'm at concerts and the audience is clapping along with the artist, you often come across people who are not able to clap in tal
Yeah.
with the music.
Yeah.
They're not able to, because that internal clock or that internal metronome has not been set,
Hmm.
and it impacts the way they talk to you, or the way they have their communication, address their communication in everyday life. I remember a video that had gone viral of Bobby McFerrin many years ago, where he was at a panel
Yeah.
discussion,
Yeah.
and he gets up and he says, "Listen, I can't talk. I'm going to show the audience how this is
Yeah.
done."
Yeah.
And he takes
It's a
them through that
neuroscience
crescendo. He takes them through that, yeah,
conference. Yeah. Yeah.
neuroscience. And the of course, the example that now we see a lot more of is Jacob Collier, where he gets his audiences in thousands across a whole stadium to chord progressions are happening just with you. So there is an internal rhythm within us that needs to be harnessed, that needs to be molded, a little bit of training, and that'll impact the way a doctor can tell a patient, give bad news, or a lawyer can explain to a client how they can get out of trouble, or how to address a legal issue. There's such worlds apart, but just a little bit of rhythm can change how the person that you are talking to feels about how you're communicating with them.
No, so there are two things that you said, right? There are people in the audience who don't clap on time. Or the funny thing is,
Hmm, hmm.
whether it's Bobby McFerrin or it's Jacob Collier, those people are actually also part of the audience, and they actually also make it interesting, because otherwise it'll all become very
Hmm.
single, right? It's only when you single them out is when you see that,
True.
oh, there's a there's a problem here. But otherwise, they're actually part of it, right? Which is actually where, for me, it's fascinating that it's manifesting in that person when he's clapping. His actually inner feeling is in rhythm, right? He's connected. He or she is connected to what's happening. But it's manifesting in the expression. It's the expression part is where it's getting flawed, right? Or what we may call flawed, because we're
Hmm,
conditioned to think it's flawed, right? So
hmm,
that's one part of it. But otherwise, if you ask me, that person is actually in tune with the music of what's happening. It's only that they're not able to express it the right
hmm.
way, right? So
They're not
there are
able
two
to
aspects.
express it, right,
Yeah.
right.
So the manifestation of that expression is what is going, like बोलना करना कुछ है लेकिन वो हो नहीं रहा है, you know. माइंड को लग रहा
हाँ,
है कि हम कर
हाँ.
रहे हैं, लेकिन एक्चुअली वो आ नहीं रहा है. इट्स लाइक सुर पकड़ना. So उसको लग रहा है कि वो गा रहा है सुर में, लेकिन वो नहीं है, बट वो कोशिश जो है ना, वो एक्चुअली बहुत, इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग दैट दे आर इवन ट्राइंग, टू एक्सप्रेस, बिकॉज है
Hmm,
तो सही, इमोशन तो
hmm.
है, कोशिश तो कर रहे हो तुम. वो एक
Correct.
दैट्स वन साइड ऑफ इट. The other side of
Hmm,
education, I think, should be sans any purpose, anything. I would give the example of our folk culture. You know, if you go down to Maharashtra, any folk culture, Gujarat, Rajasthan, of course, or you go to the Northeast or wherever, the folk cultures that are there, they inherently, the mountains, Himachal, all play some form of music or other. I don't know where we left it,
wow.
right? We just left it and we became too academic about it. We started saying things like classical music. I don't even know where that word came from, because
Hmm,
everything that has been anglicized, of course, it's good to know multiple languages, but it's also important to know your own language, because somewhere it's lost in translation. Why do we say Shastriya Sangeet? Why do we say Lok Geet? Lok Sangeet क्यों बोलते हैं? Right? लोक संगीत
hmm,
बोलते हैं क्योंकि
hmm,
लोगों का संगीत है, किसी और का नहीं है, म्यूजिक लेवल का नहीं
hmm,
है. It's people's.
hmm,
So when you celebrate Lok Sangeet, and when you build the culture of every children participating in some kind of lok sangeet in a certain way versus I think that Africa does this so beautifully. You can't find a single African in the entire continent who does not understand rhythm, grooving, dance. It's so
Yeah,
in their blood,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So in their
It's
blood.
in their blood.
So, and we have it too. It's just that we have segregated it into classes and super intellectual and God knows what all. But I think
Mm.
if we just go back to
Which is
saying,
unfortunately a colonial hangover that
I mean,
has
call it a colonial
labeled
hangover.
all of
Yeah,
these.
colonial hangover is one thing, but the worship of, music that comes from the West is actually
Mm.
detrimental. Appreciating music is very different from feeling lesser, that your music is lesser than the other, you know,
Mm.
and that we deal with because अभी मैं गुजराती फैमिली में जाके बोलूंगा कि बच्चों को लगता है कि यार मैं डांडिया क्यों बजा रहा हूँ, why don't I play drums? I tell them do both. You learn dandiya also
Mm.
and you play drums also. What's the problem?
Mm.
Why do you think yours is uncool? I said that's the problem. If you think that's cool, great. But yours is
Yeah.
also cool. Yours is equally cool. And you have an advantage. They don't have this advantage of learning to play the dholki or playing garba, whatever. They don't have it. So you make that. Like when I did Tadon, my biggest advantage was the fact that I was a mridangam player. So I said, okay, what if the mridangam actually plays hip hop beats? What if the mridangam plays drum and bass grooves? What if I think like a drummer and play? So I did not say that's less or more. I just took inspiration. The beauty is there are many who couldn't probably think or do what I did. It was a very simple thought of me being me. In a sense, like I remember a student came and asked me, I'm writing my independent songs these days. How can I be different? I said the fact is you are different. When you speak English, you are speaking Indian English,
Mm.
right? Don't think it's lesser. You speak Indian English. It's fine. I think ownership of who we are, instead of saying suddenly you're speaking Indian English and when you go on stage, you're anglicizing it. You're neither British, you're neither American, you're neither Australian, somewhere in the middle. So you rather own it, who you are. And I think that's the beauty of it because you're already different. You're a Chennai born or you're a Gujarat born. Great. That's your accent. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
Have you ever seen a Spanish or an African, person singing English in an English accent? No, they're so cool when they own up to the way they make. They'll say rhythm, RIDDIM. They've made their own thing, and it's so amazing that they own it like that. I think somewhere making music easy, accessible. Like मैं कीर्तन से मेरा शुरू हुआ, I used to go for kirtans with my dad,
Mm.
just playing as a 4 year old, 5 year old, हाथ में दे दिया इंस्ट्रूमेंट, क्या कर रहे हैं पता नहीं, बस बजा रहे हैं बजा रहे हैं बजा रहे हैं. And then you go to some other concert, you're just listening, or you go one day I'll go to some other gig that I'm listening to, whether it's metal. One thing I lent myself is to all genres of music without any prejudice, nothing.
Mm.
And that I used to call the walls. There are walls of classical music. There is a wall of rock music. I mean, rock people who do rock or hip hop think that they are creating a counterculture. But what is also sad is they are also creating their own boundaries by saying we are other
True.
than so. But then now you're creating your own boundary. Why aren't you involving other people? Like I've never been invited to any of these hip hop fests, because I don't know if they consider this as hip hop or rap. There's a conditioning that they have of what it should be, right? So even as children, as communication, as music, सिंपल चीजें अगर बच्चों को मजे लेते लेते सिखा दिया ना, इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स को इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया, शेप्स इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया, मैथमेटिक्स इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया. Konnakol में if I say there's a friend of mine, who teaches Konnakol. His name is Somashekar Joyce, and he taught multiplication as two one za kita, two za tari kita, two three za taka tari kita. So instead of saying 4 and 2,
Oh,
he's
wow.
teaching bowls, you know.
Yeah,
So
beautiful.
that pura 12 tak ka multiplication. I'll tell you one very interesting incident that happened in a school that I was teaching. There was a special child, okay, very restless kid, extremely restless. Now the teacher had
Mm.
come and told me later on after the class that this kid is like he's a special child, he's part of the whole group, but yeah. So 2 or 3 classes later, she came and told me it's amazing how he's so interested in your class. He otherwise goes for music, he's just not interested. So I said, why do you think it is? She said, because you talk a lot about math and he's very clued into math. Okay. So when I did this two ones kita, 2 2s are tari kita, 2 3s are taka tari kita, 2 4s are tiku taka tari. So 4 tak sikhata hu. Uske baad you have to just keep adding, right? 2 plus whatever. I show them the method and they do it. This kid went up to 13, 14, 16 without even me saying, and he started forming the syllables on his own, right? And I've not seen the most intelligent musician do this, right? So the fact that music has power, we have to understand and leave it to that. Like I've been to places where it's a small village in Maharashtra. Kuch sar pair nahi, nothing. Now I'm like thinking, yaar kya karu abhi inke saath? I don't want to intimidate them. Will they understand? ये सब thoughts जाते हैं, समझेंगे क्या? Typical thoughts. The minute I say, chodo yaar, let the music take over, I'm just going to throw them into the sea. We'll see. It's like saying, should I worry about what the water is going to do? I cannot. Let me take them to the water, dip them in, the water will do the job. My job is, as a diver, is just going to be around them. The minute I do that, within 15 minutes, they're in it completely. There's no cerebral idea of anything. Kids have taken it, and 1 hour later, when I've left the place, that guy actually sent me a video of the children, of the girls sitting and practicing. 1 week later also they were sitting and practicing. So beautiful. So beautiful. That's how easy it is. We've made it too much of a curriculum and loaded it with ideas of, uska left brain kya karega, right brain kya karega. अरे खाओ यार, मतलब स्वाद लेके खाओ, पता चल जाएगा कि क्या है. There is no swimmer in the world who can teach you how to feel the water. There is no swimmer. He can only take you to the water and say jump. So music is like that. Music is a river. It flows. Just allow it to flow. Don't intellectualize it so much that people get intimidated when they say, अरे आपके कर्नाटक म्यूजिक में गणित बहुत है. कुछ नहीं है, कुछ गणित नहीं है. अगर मैं आपको बोलूं कि इंसान भी 3 चीजों से बना है, right? There is a skeleton that you are. You and I will look exactly the same when we are a skeleton. Then there is a layer of form, which is you and me. The way we look is a form. There is a third, which is the emotion. This is music. So there is frequencies, which is science. That's your skeleton. There is mathematics, which is the architecture of the building, right? I measure and I create a house. I measure and I create the divisions in the house. That's for the architect to know, right? Then there is a form which he gives to the house, right? And then people bring emotions to the house. That's how it becomes a home. This journey needs to be understood. So none of it is, I can't just say skeleton is important or आप में skeletons बहुत है. It's the completely misinformed way of looking at it. Of course it's important. Of course maths is important. Of course understanding frequency is important. But that's just the skeleton. We're all going to look the same. If I say ek, ek do, 3, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3, 1 2 1, ये number है. If I say tak ta dom, takita dom, takadina dom, takita dom, takadom, tadom, ये music हो गया. ए बेडू क्या बोलता है, किधर से तू, कहाँ है स्टाइल, कर सकता है सही टाइम यही. ये इंडिया 91 का रैप हो गया. इसमें फॉर्म है. इट्स कॉल्ड मृदंगयति, राइट? मृदंग की तरह दिखता है, छोटे से बड़ा हुआ. तदोम तकदोम तकिटदोम तकदिनदोम तकिटदोम तकदोम तदोम. It's form. It looks like a mridangam. So there's so much embedded in it.
Wow.
But what did the listener say? अरे ये तो मजा आ गया. I am happy with that. It's this relationship of me doing discovery, of me presenting the deepest of always, whenever I get confused, the instant answer is food. The chef makes a dish with understanding the ingredients, understanding measurement of ingredients also, right? People will say, यार मजा आ गया, right? अभी तुमने अगर दिल से बनाया है तो वहां निकलता है. अगर तुमने दिल से नहीं बनाया है तो वो फिर अपने साइंस और मशीन के थ्रू बना के वही बिरयानी, वही खिचड़ी अलग टेस्ट करता है. तो ये फर्क समझना बहुत जरूरी है. सो इमोशंस, द फॉर्म and the science part of it. It's not easy to say art and science. This is what is art and science, and then there's emotion in it, right? So this whole thing needs to be understood. And when you teach this art form to children, you have to teach them very subconsciously all these ideas without intimidating them. So when you teach them It's the same thing like saying I'm not teaching them engineering and then showing them some factory का image and saying, look, this is what you have to do, you know. So मैं कहाँ उनको जाके कोई बड़ा पंडित जी का ये देखो ये क्या कर रहे हैं आपने देखा like why do you want to intimidate them? Let them discover. खेलने दो. It's called playing music for a reason. It's not, you know, जैसे हम बोलते हैं, I don't know, in Tamil, lot of people have this word called adikiradu. Okay, adikiradu is actually beating. Like, do you beat the drums or do you play the drums? A big difference. So you play the drums. It has to come from that idea of playing the drums, you know. And it takes time to sort of understand this and inculcate this. There's a reason why they say you should remain childlike and not childish. Because you forget all these things.
The only time that I know that when the drums are beaten is when someone is at war or it is a funeral procession. That's
Exactly,
the only
right?
time I know when the drums are beaten. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's played because, yeah, wow. This is not a podcast, Vivek. This is a masterclass. Thank you so much.
Oh no, I just
No, the way you've broken this down into the very essence of life itself, and it begins at that childhood. But I want to take you to the other end of the spectrum, where the control mechanisms, the boundaries are very hard coded. The intellectualization of everyday work is so rigid that it takes so much to break those walls down. I'm talking
yeah,
about adults. I'm talking about corporate audiences where you
yes,
do workshops in,
yeah.
in music and communication. What does it take to break those walls down? What are the learnings that you've had from those experiences?
I think communication goes a long way. You know, choice of words go a long way. Intention goes a long way. Like I learned very in the only few things that I learned when I did BCom was as a business communication class, and that time we used to be taught writing letters for different formats. You know,
Hmm.
in that there was one very interesting line which stayed with me forever. It said, and it was called the you attitude, and that you attitude was described as you write something with the intention of understanding how the person is going to read it, not what you're going to say. Yeah. तो वो कैसे सुनने वाला है, वो कैसे समझने वाला है, वो समझ के आज ऑफ कोर्स चैट जीपीटी या जो भी है आपके लिए कर देता है ये, बट ये मेरे लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया ये चीज.
Hmm.
तो एक वो था कि आप क्या बोल रहे हो और किससे बोल रहे हो. मतलब मैं अनुज से बात कर रहा हूँ कि मैं म्यूजिशियन से बात कर रहा हूँ कि मैं कॉर्पोरेट ऑडियंस से बात कर रहा हूँ. नाउ इन द कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर देयर इज अ थिंग दैट आई because I very briefly worked in the corporate sector and I'm always keenly observing words, you know, what people say. Something as simple as I'm going to work today. Okay. I found it loaded in the difference where I would say I have a gig today or I have a performance today.
Hmm.
Okay. The difference is technically I'm also going to work, but I could just say कि मैं आज काम पे जा रहा हूँ, but I'm saying I have a performance today. Performance suddenly has a connotation of performing for myself. The minute I'm saying I'm going to work, it feels like you're working for somebody else. So a small thing like what is it that you want to do for yourself? What are the, even in your corporate life, of course you have targets, you have every other thing. So I sort of try to draw a parallel with a band where I'm saying there's a drummer, there's a singer, there's a bass player, there's a keyboard player, or maybe in a classical setup there's a tabla player, there's a singer and a harmonium player or tanpula player. What are you serving? Are you serving the music or are you serving the musician?
Hmm.
Right? Or are you just serving yourself today? Answer this for yourself because this is where everything starts. If you say you're aligning with a larger purpose, so let's say that's your objective for the year, you plan your objective for the year for yourself and say that this is what I want to do. So I would just draw a parallel between performance and doing a job because I would have friends coming and telling me, "Oh man, your life is so cool," and all. And I'm thinking, "What's so cool? It's just me doing my work, right? I have to also raise an invoice.
Yeah.
I have to pay my bills."
Hmm.
I said, "It's my work, right?" Then here is another word which is again very loosely used in English and lost in translation. Is this word called dharma, right? There is a thing called swadharma, which is duty to yourself. So अगर मैं म्यूजिशियन हूँ और मेरा धर्म है कि मैं रोज उठ के रियाज करूं, तो मेरा वो धर्म है कि मैं रोज ये करूं। अगर मैं फार्मर हूं तो मेरा धर्म है कि मैं रोज उठ के जो प्लॉ करना है या जो बीज बोना है वो मेरा धर्म है। तो धर्म को समझना भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि योर ड्यूटी व्हेन यू आर born, there is a dharma that you have towards yourself, there is duty towards the society, there is duty towards your family, your friends. It's a very interesting thing. So when you say my duty today is to, or my dharma, which is what you love doing, is XYZ, you suddenly dissociate this thing of working for someone and working with someone. Same thing which I told you about performance, which is, am I performing for
Right.
someone or am I performing with people? I think that changes everything. And there are very few people, very few leaders, very few who understand this, that you're working with people. It's not just working for an organization. The burden suddenly becomes lesser the minute you remove the connotation of working for.
Oh. So when you go to work, basically, are you going to beat the drums or are you going to play the drums
Exactly.
with everybody else?
Yeah.
What kind of exercises do you incorporate in this to break down those walls, to first just get them to shed their preconceived notions or their preconditioning? How do you read the room?
So one is where I very categorically split them because they're already split into their organization structure, right? Into sales, marketing, finance, whatever. So then I split them into, let's say, frequencies of sound. So each will have a certain frequency of sound. Once that is done, I individually teach them different patterns because that's how each pattern is. But it's actually broken down from one single pattern. So let's say if there is a entire drum groove, right? So if there's a kick drum which goes kung, kung, kum, 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 but then there's a snare which goes ta 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 ta. So I teach them this individually, a hat pattern, a shaker pattern. They all learn it individually, and then we bring it together, and then we play a song on top of that. So it could be a song which they already know, where you're breaking down the whole thing and saying, look, it all sounds separate, but ultimately it's one song. So that idea of making, sort of just realization of the fact that you might be individually different, but at the end of the day, you're serving one song is what is sort of communicated through this exercise.
So the synchrony that can be created, once you bring in just your part of it, once you bring in your
Yeah,
rhythm to it or your frequency to it,
exactly.
and then
So you show you're different. You make them feel that they're different, but then suddenly you see that you're actually one of the spoke in the wheel.
the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. So that's the realization that it eventually lends to.
And how do you think it has impacted adults, these exercises, these workshops that you do? How do you think it impacts them when they're working maybe in an IT company, and then they're going and developing software? Now they've got to get back to doing what they do. How do you think this rhythm training or this exposure to a whole new way of thinking, how does it impact what they do in everyday life?
I mean, one is that musically also, if I have to just talk it, just give the parallel to music, I might have the best chops that I have and practiced a lot, but it's not necessary that people might you know vibe with what I'm doing or connect with what I'm doing. So in the same way, you might be developing the biggest software or the most complex thing that you think, but it's not necessary that you can expect people to understand or immediately sort of validate it. Where you go back saying, oh, you know what, I made it so it's so intelligent and blah blah blah, but nobody understood it. It's the same as somebody saying, I sang such a beautiful rag today, but किसी को समझ में नहीं आया. That's one realization that's always drawn as a parallel, right? Constantly reminding. I mean, look, this is what I would say, that whether it's musicians or corporate, I in fact teach musicians discipline of the corporate life, where I say it's important to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever time you think. If you think you're going to start at 11, start at 11 every day. Get ready, right? And start your work, whatever your work is. And because most musicians don't get this, it's so fluid that time is just gone. So understanding the value of time, being disciplined. So it's not just one way; it's actually the other way too. That we need to understand if there's a 9:30 a.m. meeting, You need to be there by 9:30 or 9:20 and not come at 9:45, right? So there is that aspect of understanding discipline from the corporate life. If there is an objective to be met, oh, I have an album release. So then work backwards. What do you want to do for that? What are the things that you want to do before you release that album? You're putting a weight behind the entire thing. It's almost like Tadom also, I call it a startup because it was an idea. I started teaching, young rappers or musicians, and then eventually there are people who are now already teaching, and then there are performances. So they studied, and now they are also making money out of what they learned, right? So there is an income generation process also that it has gone through for everybody who's been part of the process. So it's an idea which got translated into building a team, and from the team we started generating revenue. Started making profits. We scaled. What is all this? It's all how a startup operates, right?
And through all of this, whether, I mean, you say like Tadhom is the startup, and I truly resonate with that kind of intention that you're looking at it, because it's very easy to slip into a, okay, I'm going to just wake up at a certain time, and then see, when I have a performance, I'm going to maybe rehearse a little bit and then get on stage. Whereas that discipline goes a long way in expanding your own exploration of your craft, or the art. That
Absolutely.
discipline is required, because
Yeah.
when you are not performing, or you are not training or teaching, you're also creating. There's a lot of innovation that's coming, because I'm talking about tunes, I'm talking about mridangam. If you can tell me something about that, because something very interesting that you've created, and I think that's come out of the discipline, because every day you wake up and you're like, okay, what more can I learn, or what more can I create out of what I'm already doing, apart from what I'm already doing. So tell me something about that.
Medidangam actually, I don't even know if it came out of a discipline. Actually, it came out of just me being in constant dream state about different things. It just, I started learning MIDI programming back like around 97, 98 when MIDI had just started sort of becoming a thing. Again, when I saw the MIDI instruments, they were all keyboard, drums. There was nothing Indian,
Hmm.
as a MIDI instrument.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about 15, 16 years back, you know. I mean, there are products now in the market already that are there, which is, some tabla, MIDI instrument and all. But my reason for doing it was not about building some technology, high funda stuff. It was about saying, if you look at it again very carefully, it's always about the smallest of thing. If you see how most percussions that are played, including let's say tabla or a conga, it's played towards gravity this way.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
most Indian origin instruments, if I may put it that way, which is a mridangam, dholak, dholki, dhol, they all play against gravity. Okay, so even if you see
Oh wow, I never
temple
looked at it that
architecture,
way.
whatever, you'll see the instruments are parallel to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's all in the detail. So the largest actually community that we are talking to are people who play this way against gravity. Dholak se leke folk, right? Dholak is played in all folk. Dholki Marathi mein basta hai. I've been to Chhattisgarh where they play drums, which is just a big log of whatever, and it's again left right. It's not this way. It's all this way.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
how do we bring them to appreciate and marry technology? This playing, this hand action is also very Indian, which is called
Hmm.
tari. Okay? They say tari, 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 or tari kita, tiri kita, whatever. It's a very Indian thing. That's where it came from to sort of, and I'm actually designing the second prototype of it as we speak.
Okay.
We don't have, if I was in some other country, maybe I would have done it and started even giving it out for musicians. I've had people asking me, can you sell us one and all? I'm like, man, unfortunately, I just have one. In fact, I'm working with the limitations that it has, and I know what the limitations are, but I'm trying to develop a prototype. So my excitement was how can I include a community of drummers in the country, which is completely not in sync with, like, why do I have to teach them a new action just because it's available in drums or keyboard? Why do I need to teach them that action? They already know an
Hmm.
action. right? Because that's what was happening in the West too. They did not teach you a new instrument. They said, "Oh, you're a pianist, so let me make a MIDI piano for you. Oh, you're a drummer, so let me make a MIDI thing for you." Why did they do that? Because it allows you creative exploration. So why am I bypassing that process here and teaching them drums? Like, why should a dholak player learn drums? Can I make a MIDI instrument which can explore what he does? So my intentions were rather are still there, where someday I'll have it fully ready. I mean, it's just taken forever to build it, but the prototype is there. I've used it a few times, and with that prototype, I'm building a second one now. So let's see where that goes.
Fabulous. Now I look forward to talking to you about that when that happens. And what an incredible session of insights. Really, you've changed my own perspectives about so many things. And thank you for doing what you do and speaking to me about it.
No, I have to remind myself of all these things every day. Trust me, um, I'm dealing with as much flaws in myself in this entire journey. But I think these things I have to remind myself every time. You know, and so thank you for making me speak and remind myself of all these things as well.
No, I'm glad. Like you said, well, communication is about empathy and humility, and it's something that you symbolize. And I guess there's a lot that I'm hoping our viewers and listeners will be able to take away from this conversation and improve their way of communicating with the world. But thank you, and I hope to have another session with you sometime soon. So we'll connect again. And thanks, man. Thanks for speaking with me.
Thank you. Such an honor. Thank you so much.
What a masterclass, what a conversation. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. Do tune into the other episodes as well if you haven't already. There are many exciting conversations I've had with people from all walks of life, and I can't wait to roll them out for you. Like, share, subscribe, spread the love. Stay tuned to Speak with Anuj.